As a human, if you're found to be the mate of a lichen, it is a fate worse than death. Terribly, I find out that I'm not only a lichen's mate, but that lichen happens to be the most famous and the most brutal of them all. You're my mate. You're my property. My eyes bulged out of my head as I snapped up to regard the guy who was obviously the king. His eyes were locked on mine as he began to advance very quickly. Oh, great. That's why he looked familiar. He was the same guy who I bumped into only an hour or two beforehand. The one who claimed I was his mate. No! A small pain-filled cry left my mouth as I ran in front of my brother, just in time to take the lashing that was originally meant for him. That boy just completely disregarded the alpha of your district's pack. Step aside! One of the pack's warriors held a long, thick whip in his hand while looking at me, then glancing behind him to look upon my brother. He's 6 years old. He didn't mean to ... I was cut off by another load crack, and a stinging sensation hit my cheek. My hand moved up to my face. As I inspected the wound, I looked at the fingers that had gently grazed my now stinging cheek and noticed a line of blood coated them. My face was bleeding. Do you wish to make this a public punishment? I can assure you that it will not end well for you if you don't move aside, human. I don't want to take another punishment. I had received my last one almost 2 months ago now, and it took me weeks to heal. My back is already scarred for life. He meant no disrespect. He was just playing, please. He's a child. Would you really stoop so low as to ... double quotes? Another crack was heard as his whip slashed down on my arm. I winced before my eyes shot open, seeing the lichen's fist connect with my jaw. I stumbled backwards, spitting blood out of my mouth as I bent my head in submission, simply to save my brother's life. I felt my little brother's hands under my top as he clutched onto me, fear clouding his irises. To the courtyard. My head snapped up as my eyes grew. Run home and lock the doors. Stay with Mom. I whispered before I felt a pair of hands on each arm as I was suddenly dragged away by 2 wolves. I turned back slightly to see my brothers fleeing form head towards our house in the human district. A smile graced my face knowing my father was safe. Shortly after, fear clouded me as I was forced along. Many people began staring at me as I was dragged to the foolish stage in the courtyard. My wrists were then fastened to a post, and a leather strap was placed in my mouth to bite on. Humans were always forced to come out of their homes to watch the public floggings, much to our dismay. Even when it's not you receiving the punishment, it's almost just as hard to watch. The minute the lichens thought they had enough of an audience, my punisher grew his claws and tore my top to shreds, showing my already scarred back to the crowd. A leather strap was placed in my mouth for me to bite down on, and I heard a few gasps from some of the humans that recognized me as the first hit landed. After the 20th stroke, I was shaking uncontrollably. The pain in my back was almost unbearable, and I knew without even looking that blood was pouring out of each cut. 15 was the usual amount given for punishments, so I couldn't understand why I was receiving more. After the 29th stroke, I flopped over my arms. I was exhausted, in pain, and physically drained. I had taken double the amount given in regular punishment, and was unable to comprehend why. The last stroke sounded through the air, and an audible grunt left my mouth as I dropped the leather strap I was biting onto the floor. My hands were released, and my body instantly crashed to the ground, blood dropping slightly onto the little stage that was set up. I lay on the stage, panting, trying to cover my exposed front when I felt a foot dig into my now back. This is what happens when you forget your place. Wolves were made to be the superior species, and you will show us respect at all times. I understood. A few mumbles of yes were heard before my hair was grabbed and I was thrown off the stage. My naked arms scraped on the floor and blood poured out of the wound. Nobody moved to help until all the wolves were off the stage, out of fear of being next in line. I felt a warm coat being placed over my bloodied back and was helped to my feet by 2 men. Dylan? My tired head turned towards my best friend, Nick Kywell. What did you do? I was still being held up by the 2 men who helped me as I spoke to him. Freddie, I whispered out. I was too tired to even speak, never mind anything else. He just looked at me and nodded his head. Is Freddie okay? I nodded my weak head at Nick before almost falling over. The men holding me rushed me to the town's human nurse, Sheila, who quickly cleared her table while I was placed stomach down on it by the 2 men. She gently took the coat off me before gasping and rushing around gathering stuff. A few torturous grunts left my mouth as the pain suddenly stopped being numb. I was shivering in shock by the time Julia came back. I'm going to administer something. I felt a sharp stinging pain in my shoulder blade before my back went completely numb and the world became black. My eyes gradually opened as I sat up, my neck aching from lying on my stomach on a hard wooden table and my back stinging. I looked down at my once bared torso to find a large bandage, perfectly wrapped around my entire torso, covering my exposed mountains as well. I noticed a small glass of water placed next to me and took it in my hand, greedily drinking every last drop. Realizing I had to get ready for school, I walked over to write a note for Sheila explaining how grateful I was that she helped me and where I've gone. I slowly walked up the hill to my house. Once I got indoors, I went straight to my room and grabbed my uniform. After the Lycans took over, they initiated the rule that all humans must wear a certain uniform, and all wolves can express their individuality. The lycanthrope species are a disgusting and humiliating race. Once I was dressed, I headed off. The 20 minutes it takes to get to school ended up taking almost half an hour due to the throbbing pain in my back. Once I got to the human entrance, I realized I was late. Name and year. The Lycan in charge of human attendance spoke, his eyes boring into mine as he commanded me. Due to the rules, I bent my head in submission to the Wolf as he looked at the electronic tablet in his hands. Dylan Riley, senior year. He quickly tapped away on his pad before roughly pulling my arm towards him. The movement caused me to wince as he injected me with the clear liquid that neutralizes any traces of wolfsbane that may be in our system. Get to class immediately. One more late and you'll be joining in with gym class. My eyes widened at the threat. Humans don't have gym class. The wolves feel that we shouldn't be encouraged to get stronger. By joining gym, I would basically be target practice for them. Noted? The sarcasm dripping in my voice caused me to snap my head up. The lycanthrope are a very temperamental race, and I just broke one of the rules. My entire stance changed as I realized I can't take another punishment yet. Get to class before I drag you there. I nodded my head quickly before walking off down the corridor to the human section of school. Luckily, on the way, I only passed one of their species. I lowered my head as I continued to walk. Once there, I knocked on the door and waited for our human teacher to tell me to enter. I walked through the door and everyone's head snapped to me. Dylan, why are you in? One of the girls asked. I smiled tiredly and turned to the teacher. I'm sorry, I'm late. Mr. Foley shook his head before telling me to take a seat. He turned back to the board to continue lesson. Just as I thought he would start, he turned back to me. You don't need to apologize. I nodded my head in thanks. What happened yesterday, Dylan? I sighed, knowing I was going to have to explain. My brother, Freddie, disrespected the alpha. It was either him or me. I shrugged before turning my head away from the teacher. Where was your mom? My head turned to Erin, who was sat near the front of the class, on the left-hand side where all mated human students sit, with her foolish mark on full show for everyone to see. None of your business, I growled out, causing the teacher to look at me shocked. Dylan, don't make me give you a detention. I scowled. The only thing I hate more than wolves is humans who are mates to them. Now, I know what you're thinking. That was a horrible comment for me to make, especially considering we were friends. That is until a few months ago when her mate turned 17. Me, her, and Nick were walking through the hall with our heads down when the beta of our district's pack suddenly took her arm. He uttered the one word no human wants to hear. Not even 48 hours later, she was wearing his disgusting mark. We had a few mated humans in our class. One of the girls would already have a baby, while one of the guys would soon be a father. They all had to sit on the left side of the class. Much like in the early 1900s, we have a hierarchy. Upper class equals the Lycans, middle class equals mated humans, and lower class equals the normal humans, who were basically considered scum. Now the mated wolves can express themselves as long as they wear a mark. They can wear whatever they want to, and they do everything with the wolves, except class. They even share the Lycan side of the lunch hall. It's disgusting how they forget their own kind. Dylan, you know, we didn't have a choice, we are their mates. Of course she had a choice, they all did. I may hate the Lycans, but I have done my research and I know my history. A wolf can't mark their mate without permission, cause it'll make you die. So shut up and enjoy betraying your own kind. I'm not going to lie, I bully the mated humans, I can't help it. They simply disgust me. You can call me what you want, my views will never change. I hope you end up with a mate. She seethed, tears building in her eyes. Then you'll know how hard it is to resist the person you're destined to be with. My eyes burned holes into her skull as I glared at her. She instantly recanted as tears slipped from her eyes. If one of them things ever say that word to me ... I'll let myself die. The whole class gasped as I seethed. Yes, I would quite happily die rather than be forced into a relationship with one of them. Dylan, don't even joke about things like that. Mr. Foley looked mortified at my confession, but I simply shrugged. He and I both knew I wasn't bluffing. He eventually spoke to the entire class after staring at me for so long. No one is going to harm themselves in any way. Now let's get back to the lesson, shall we? I honestly didn't care what he thought. I wasn't built for this new world and everybody knew it. One more word out of you, Dylan, and I'll send you to the principal. After what happened yesterday, I would have thought you'd be on your best behavior. Seriously, now I'm annoyed. They threatened a 6-year-old kid. My hands slammed down on the desk as I stood up. They publicly humiliated me just for standing up for my little brother. What's the point in following their rules if we're just going to get punished anyway? After I spoke, Nick stood up. Then half the class followed. The mated humans stayed sat, quietly. They looked quite scared, actually. Okay, sit down, all of you. I'm on your side, but starting a rebellion right this minute isn't the way to go. I hate the Lycans, but I won't condone the bullying of our own kind. I scoffed but nodded, sitting down and watching everyone else sit down after me. Don't you dare call those traitors our own kind. My head shot to Erin, who was fully crying. The girl began to subconsciously rub her stomach, and Gary, the mated male, had his head turned to the door. Just as we were about to speak again, the tannoy went off, and the principal's voice rang through the room. Humans! I scowled at his words and turned my attention out of the window. As most of you know, the Alpha twins will be celebrating their birthday tomorrow. As such, festivities are in order. Oh great, the Alpha's twin children. Adrian and Arya are the worst Lycans alive. I swear, just because they are the Alpha's kids, they literally get away with everything. If their birthday is tomorrow, then the wolves are going to be worse than ever. All students will be present to greet them. 2 lines will be made, with humans on the left and the lycanthrope on the right. Any mated human will be at the front of the line for their year. You will all also be in order of your school year. That is all. Chat broke out the minute the tannoy was finished. We haven't had a school gathering since the Alpha King visited 3 years ago, before his son's coronation. Nick was right. The last time we all gathered like that was for the King and Queen's visit, when he decided to let the world know that he was to renounce his title to his only child's son Josh. That sick guy, he wants to make sure everyone is there so those idiot twins can find their mates. Yes, I was mad. My fists connected with the table in front of me once more as I thought about how disgusting the situation was. You see, the twins will be turning 17, so it's very possible someone in our school could be their mate. Finding a mate is sacred to a wolf. The minute they say that one word, your fate is sealed. They will turn your mind, morph you into being a lover of their kind, and then you'll give in. That won't happen to me. I'm growing old to see the world as it once was, and I'm going to choose who I'll be with. No one will take that dream away from me. After a long night and an even longer morning, we were all finally stood in the hallway at school waiting for the twins to arrive. Mine! Everyone that was stood in the hallway tensed up. As we were seniors, me and Nick were stood towards the very back of the human line. All the mated people were situated directly opposite their wolf mates in their years. We stayed silent and still as Arya walked down the hall and stopped directly in front of Nick. His eyes widened in fear, unsure of whether to look up or keep his head lowered. Look me in the eye, mate. He glanced at me slightly as if asking what he should do. I said, look me in the eye. He slowly moved his eye line up to look at her face. I took a glance myself to see her eyes pitch black with lust. I can't. Before he was able to mutter anything else, 2 wolves from opposite grabbed him out of the line and dragged him behind Arya. Hey! My head shot up before I could stop myself. My mouth also forgot its place as I jumped out of line. Everyone's head shot to me as my eyes widened in realization at what I'd done. Adrian, the other twin, walked up to me before punching me right in the stomach. I doubled over instantly. Feeling the sting in my slightly healed back. I know you. You were publicly flogged only 2 days ago. God, I hate this guy. I also have it on good authority that you openly spoke out against our rules and regulations in yesterday's class. My head shot down the line slightly to see Erin. Looking a little frightened, her mate, the beta-to-be, was looking at her. nodding his head in reassurance. You traitor, you grasped on your own kind? I yelled at her before feeling a fist connect with my cheek. My head whipped to the side from the force while my class members gasped. I'm so done with this treatment. Right then, I wasn't in charge of my actions. My fists curled up and my stance became a lot more defensive. My head snapped up to the alpha-to-be, and I looked him in the eye. You don't know the meaning of the word disrespect. I suddenly hurled my fist towards his head, which he easily dodged, but my foot came up and kicked him instead. He stumbled backwards from the force with wide eyes. You do actually hit me. He didn't even sound annoyed, more shocked. Everyone in the hallway was watching, waiting for the alpha to do something, but instead, he simply stood up straight, regaining his composure. I think everyone should get back to class. He began to walk away, following his sister when I called him back. What about Nick? Simple, he's my sister's mate. He now belongs to her. Arg, he's not a object. He's not her property. A chuckle left his mouth before turning his back to me again. All humans are property. A short while later, everyone made it to science class. Our teacher, Mrs. Matthews, is mated to the Lycans Pack doctor. She also now has a 4- and 2-year-old with him. She was one of the first humans to be cohered into a false relationship. What were you thinking, young lady? I rolled my head at her before looking at the empty seat next to mine. Nick was with that foolish Wolf girl right now. Being changed. I'm so angry, it's ridiculous. I was thinking, this guy is being a prick. Did you hear him? All humans are property. I looked up and the whole class looked at me like I had 3 heads. Talking about wolves is one thing, but talking about an alpha is punishable by death. Attacking an alpha is an even worse offense. There was then a knock at the door and in walked Erin and her band of mated bad guys. Sorry we're late, missus. Erin, how are things between you and Bada Monroe? She blushed. The traitor actually blushed at the mention of his name. He spoke to me last night about trying for a baby. We need a good, strong boy to take over as Beta. I scoffed, looking at her as she took her seat. You guys are actually pathetic. Why can't it be a girl? Those mutts are basically Neanderthals. I voiced my opinion and saw all the shocked faces around me. Calling the Lycans mutts is the same as them calling us scum. After lesson had ended, the entire school was called into the hall for assembly. This is where any human who has been found to have broken the rules were punished. Usually 10 lashings were given out or something similar. Welcome to the school assembly. Congratulations to the Alpha twins for finding both your mates. Now on to the business at hand. As the 5-year anniversary of the New World is coming up, we have been informed that the Alpha King will be visiting our district next week. This is very exciting news. We want you all to look your absolute best. She-wolves and mated females will wear exemplary dresses made by seamstress. Male wolves and mated men will wear tailored suits. Anyone who doesn't comply will be reprimanded. The Alpha King? No one has met him yet. He took over the throne 3 years ago when he turned 18. He really didn't make any appearances though. Great! This month is going to be a nightmare. As for the humans, you will be given a new uniform to wear for the visit. These are to be neatly ironed and worn to the highest standard. As for the following humans, based on your attitude this past week, you will be coming to the front and facing punishment. Tony Somerset? Tony's head shot up as he looked around. He was in the year below, but he shared my views when it came to the Lycans. He slowly walked up to the front of assembly. Almost instantly his top was cut in 2, and he received 10 lashings. A girl named Kara was next, and she too received 10 lashings. A few more people went up, slowly accepting their fate, then suddenly my name was called. Dylan Riley! Inside I was terrified, but I simply shrugged my shoulders. I guess I did kind of expect this. Although I'm not sure if my back can take any more damage. You attacked an alpha, correct? His eyes bored into mine as I bowed my head, submitting to his authority. Technically, no. Everyone in the school gym looked on in fear as my head moved to the front row of the wolf side. Adrian sat with a werewolf girl in the year below. Her name was Jana. I guess he found his mate. Nick and Arya were nowhere to be seen though. Adrian gave me a shrug as if to say he didn't tell, before smirking at my comment. He hasn't officially taken the alpha title yet, so he's just ... I looked at the principal and noticed his eyes black and his claws out. He was in what Lycans call a half shift, triggered when the subject has become angered. He turned to 2 security wolves and gave them a nod. Almost immediately, I was forced onto my knees. My arm was slammed on a table and held in place by one wolf, while my body was held in place by the other. Okay, I don't think this is needed. I have alpha blood. A foolish human girl can't hurt me. My head snapped to Adrian, who had stood up in front of the school to stop what was happening. Nevertheless, humans need to know their place. With that, the pressure on my arm increased as our principal's hand pulled my sleeve up before a long claw punctured my skin. The searing pain from the fresh wound had my eyes scrunched and my fist clenched. I bit the inside of my cheek hard, instantly tasting blood. However, no sound left my mouth. He continued to write, using my skin as a canvas and his claws as a marker. It went on forever. My vision blurred slightly at one point as I turned my head away. After minutes of torture, he was done and the pressure on my arm eased. Instantly, I took my arm away, hissing through my teeth at the pain. I was about to scurry off stage when I was roughly grabbed yet again, my arm being held in the air by the principal while my feet were inches off the floor. Blood dripped from the wound, and the pattern he had made was on show for everyone to see. Loads of people gasped. Even the wolves looked slightly horrified at what had happened. This is what happens when a human decides to speak out. I can promise, anyone who so much as says one word about our way of life will have the same punishment. My arm was starting to seriously ache from being held in the air for so long, and the lack of blood flow to my suspended arm was causing me pins and needles. Still, I refused to make a sound. I held the tears back and I bit my cheek harder, causing more blood to fill my mouth. "That's enough, Bradley!" Adrian growled. He was still stood up and looking at the scene in front of him. His eyes hard as he stared at the principal. A low, warning growl erupted from his body, which had the head teacher gulping. He quickly let go of my arm, causing me to crash to the floor. A small cry left my mouth as I hit the hard floor. Immediately, I scrambled away. My foot just missed the high step leading to the stage and I fell, waiting for the impact of the ground, but it never came. Two strong arms wrapped around me, catching my weak body, causing me to look up. My eyes widened as I noticed Adrian had caught my falling form. This isn't part of the human punishment program. Adrian growled, causing me to tense in his grip. I pushed him away from me before fixing my uniform top. The room was deadly silent, taking in the scene in front of them, while I stole a glance at my forearm. Carved into my skin by his devastating claws were two words that would most definitely scar my body for life. Human scum. Lessons must be learned. She received lashing nearly 2 days ago, and clearly it had no effect on her. Another growl left Adrian's body as he stepped onto the stage. I wasn't bothered though. You would think I'd be ashamed, but I simply smiled slightly. I fixed my sleeve a little so it wouldn't rub on the fresh wound before speaking. It doesn't matter. The whole room looked at me, shocked by my attitude. I would rather be labeled human scum than have any resemblance to your kind. I'm proud of what I am. How many of you can say that? After my amazing little speech, I walked right down the middle between the humans and lichens and out the door. No more compliance. I'm going to get away with as much as I can without getting into too much bother. There will come a day when the lichens' power will fizzle out. When it does, I'll be ready. I'll be waiting for the day we take our world back. As for the best part about my plan, no one can stop me.